Live at present.
Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. And welcome to Hear Thoughts. I'm so excited about this evening's topic. I can't wait for you to get into the room so we could get into it. Tonight's topic: is it hard to find a spouse in the church? We are going to debunk that question tonight. So I'm going to give you all some time to get into the room before we start this evening. Getting some. Why is it saying slow connection? Ah, I'm laughing because we got some mics. We got some mics, so we're using them tonight. So if you get a little feedback, it's because we are testing. You see, it's now 5 minutes past 8. All right, so we are getting ready to start, guys. It's Here Talks. Tonight's topic: is it hard to find a spouse in the church? We are going to get into it tonight. So tonight, co-host, come
Yes.
in.
Hmm. Yes, 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 yes.
So you know how the folks just jump on a late, but we're gonna
No,
get
that's all right.
started.
Inside.
What they missed, they will go back and get.
Most assured. Hey Joe, see you inside, buddy. Thanks.
And we
Welcome.
have Kenrick
Hey Kenrick, is that what?
Housen.
Housend.
Yes.
It's Tavi Bram.
So tonight's topic, is it hard to find a spouse in the church?
It's an interesting topic.
Yes, an interesting topic.
Yeah, it is. It is.
So we're going to start. We're going to start with what I think is the number one premise as a believer that we all go on. The number one premise
Right,
when looking for a spouse, which is the go-to, you have to be equally yoked.
right, right. Most of the times that is what we know. That's what we know is said, I should say,
Yeah.
as opposed to what we know, but that's what we know is said. Yeah,
And I think that's what most of us have been taught.
yeah. Most of
Equally
us have been
yoked.
told that.
Now, for me, when we say equally yoked, what does that truly mean? Because I know for a lot of persons, and that's in discussions more or less with girlfriends, the premise for equally yoked means he was baptized, he's saved,
Right,
and he goes to church.
right,
And that's it. That's the criteria for equally yoked
right.
most of the time.
Most
Because
of
I
the
think
time.
if you ask any believer who is waiting for a spouse or who wasn't waiting at some point,
Mm-hmm.
um, what they considered equally yoked to me,
Mm-hmm.
most times they say the person is saved and they in church.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it.
Right.
I've yet to find somebody who has broadened
That.
that horizon
Right. Right.
in
Right.
terms
Right.
of what it means to be equally yoked when looking for a spouse
Right.
in the church.
Right.
So come in,
What,
Omina,
what,
come on.
what, 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 I want you to kind of highlight the question again that we have in tonight.
Okay,
So
so
that's
the question is it hard to find a spouse in the church? And I
okay.
just started on this premise in terms of being equally yoked.
Right.
And the way that we normally define it, why it is causing a lot of challenges when it comes to finding a spouse in the church.
So the main thing that we're saying is that we have encountered persons, and I
Yes.
think you were saying you had some experiences, but we have encountered persons who would have said that it is difficult to find a spouse in the church,
Yes.
more or less, right?
You have to come
So
into the
so
front.
I'm all for the free.
You don't want to come close.
No.
Come on.
So more so we're looking at was at, as you just mentioned, what is initially said to us
Mm-hmm.
in terms of finding a spouse in the church as it relates to being equally yoked and so on, right?
Yeah.
But even before I think we attempt to answer that, I think really to emphasize again why I asked what was the main question, because um, persons would have encountered some difficulties
Mm-hmm.
you would have heard of, and again I say you would have had experiences, I guess, which we discussed before.
Yeah.
um, and it's kind of like, well, okay, if the only premise is being equally yoked, which is means somebody saved,
Mm-hmm.
they're in the church, then
Why is it so
why all
challenging?
these challenges,
Yeah.
why is all these challenges? And again, I think as we know statistically, um, majority of the divorces that take place are in the church and
Yes.
comes out of the church. So it shouldn't be
It
if
shouldn't
it's
be that
just
way.
if it's just on the premise of being.
And that's why I wanted to start with that particular point,
Yeah, yeah,
because I think we need to look at that
yeah,
and
yeah,
really kind of stretch it out
yeah.
to have a better understanding. Because if we just go on that premise, equally
Then you
yoked, is
should
the
have a
person
better should yeah.
saved and in church, we shouldn't have what we are
You should
experiencing
have a
now.
much greater result of a
Yeah,
positive result.
of great marriages.
Yeah. And that's not really the
Yeah,
case coming out of the church in that
yeah.
respect.
But you end up hearing a lot of horror stories. coming out from it. That's a, that's a horror
A
stories
lot of
coming
horror
out of the
stories
church. So
coming out of the church.
that's debunk equally yoked.
All right. That's a good debunking.
Yeah.
Equally yoked. Coming out of the book of Second Corinthians, chapter 6, verses 13, where Paul speaks about not being unequally yoked, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of the first things we must understand, while it is a text that is used heavily for relationships
Yeah.
and marriages, Paul was really addressing a lot more than just relationships and marriages when he was speaking about that. He
Mm-hmm.
was actually speaking about relationships on the whole. And in
Yeah.
this context, relationships meaning relationships that relates to um, deep partnerships,
Mm-hmm.
right? So because of that, obviously you would have marriages falling into that context because marriages is a partnership
Yeah.
and it's a long-term partnership.
Mm-hmm.
However, Paul the apostle was not just speaking about partnerships in marriage, he was speaking about all relationships that goes into that dimension of partnership. So that can refer to business,
Yeah.
that can refer to any form of long-term agreement
Mm-hmm.
and relationship. So that I think that's one of the first things that is very important for us to understand when we talk about the scripture, the text that talks about being unequally yoked. It was not necessarily a scripture or a text that was just centered around marriages,
Yeah.
right? That's the first thing. The second thing with that text and applying it to relationships, note what the Apostle Paul says. Um, do not be unequally yoked
Mm-hmm.
with an unbeliever.
Mm-hmm.
No, an unbeliever
Mm-hmm.
and an unsaved person
Mm-hmm.
is two different things.
Okay.
They are two different individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll explain. Um, an unbeliever is an unbeliever.
Yeah.
And what do I mean by that? An unbeliever is someone who has demonstratively exhibit they do not believe.
Yeah.
They have heard, they have been exposed to the truth,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't believe.
Okay.
And they don't have any intentions to believe.
Yeah.
Now, that person is entirely different from someone who is not saved,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
I'll go further and give an example. Remember this, there's a story being told out of the scriptures concerning two men who were on the cross at the side of Jesus,
Yeah.
right? So here it is, you have two individuals who are at that time in the same light. They are both not saved,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they are also at the same time both unbelievers. Now, however, what you have coming out of that story and out of that experience is that one person
Mm-hmm.
remains an unbeliever.
Yeah.
He is in the face of Christ himself and he chooses not to believe.
Mm-hmm.
However, you have the other person who believes and immediately he is saved in less than 2 seconds,
Okay.
right?
All right. For those of you now coming on, we the question is it hard to find a spouse in the church? Um the thought process behind it, if you are seeking to be married, why not, why isn't the church the first place that most people will go to? Because they would,
And I think no, I think we should say that in today's culture
into this,
because it
you would,
has become that,
yeah, you would think that the church is the first place that somebody would go because you
especially
should,
believers, especially
especially
believers
believers,
we're
because
talking
you
about.
should find the right spouse
Mm-hmm.
in the church
Mm-hmm.
with all the attributes
Mm-hmm.
that is needed.
Mm-hmm.
So, therefore, we are starting with debunking the whole principle of being equally yoked.
Yeah,
Yeah? So,
right,
continue.
right. So here it is, you have these two persons on the cross, right?
Mm-hmm.
They are both unsaved.
Mm-hmm.
But immediately in less than 5 seconds,
Mm-hmm.
you have one of them being saved and
Mm-hmm.
entering into paradise with the Lord,
Yeah.
as was promised and said. And then you have another person remaining an unbeliever. right? Now, we got to that point by establishing that when Paul said an unbeliever, it is much more than just being not saved,
Yeah.
right? An unbeliever is really someone who has heard, they are exposed to the truth,
And they
and
make a decision not to.
so they are not a believer. They do not intend to believe. It goes way beyond not just being saved,
Okay.
right?
So I get that point. We understand the equally yoked concept, right? But coming from the standpoint, okay, so you decide you're ready to get married. You look into the church. As a
Mm,
male or female, you look into the church because that's the best place to look as a believer one.
mm,
So you're going, somebody is saved, meaning that they were baptized, they believe,
mm, mm,
and they in church.
right.
Is that the be all and the end all in terms of what equally you should mean? Or could we go deeper?
Though
Or should we go deeper? Because I have seen in the past, and I have friends, even from my experience, you go into the church, there's a gentleman, he is in church, he's baptized, he is in church consistently,
right,
church goer, he in prayer meeting, in all his services,
church going,
he's church going.
right.
And you think that's the requirement. Yes, Lord.
Mm,
It's him.
mm.
And you're running
Because he's going to church
because he's going to church and he's
and
baptized.
he's baptized, so quote
So,
unquote,
Lord,
right?
as him,
Yeah,
we
quote
ru-
unquote, he's saved,
he's saved. We're running and we get married only to realize it's chaos, hell and destruction.
right,
Will still take it fine. And you're now asking yourself how.
right.
When you went on the that premise equally you.
Equally yoked, and that's all that you
And
went
that's what
on.
went on.
Hmm.
Now I'm asking, is there a deeper context to that equally yoke when it pertains to marriage? Should we be looking for other things besides the person is baptized and they come into church?
Right, and the answer is yes, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why the answer is yes again, if we just go on the premise of what was said by the Apostle Paul
Mm-hmm.
concerning being equally yoked, right, or not being equally yoked with an unbeliever, again, you must remember where we started with this whole principle of the Apostle Paul.
Mm-hmm.
It was not relating to relationships and marriages alone,
Yeah.
right?
But we're taking it from the
Yeah, I know
marriage
we're taking it
context
from
now.
that context, but what I'm saying,
Yeah.
if we have been taught wrong,
Yeah.
that's the point I'm making.
Okay.
Because most of the times when that text is used, it's used in the
Only for
context for
marriage.
marriage.
And it relates to partnership on the whole.
And yeah, exactly,
Be it business,
exactly,
whatever, be it
be it
ministry,
whatever, you
whatever you're doing.
understand.
Okay.
So when persons who have been taught wrong are taught, okay, this is just something being spoken about marriages,
Yeah.
right, and relationships, what happens is that they go with that, as you are saying, and then everything else is abandoned as far as relationships are concerned.
Yeah.
Right, when in point and in fact, as we are trying to establish, you have to go deeper than just somebody is in church and they're saved when it comes to a relationship,
Yeah.
right? And the reason being to that is because you are getting in a relationship and a marriage with an individual,
Mm-hmm.
right? An individual.
Yeah.
And that individual just does not just have a spiritual life, but they have other components of life,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if you just go on the premise of the person is saved, and that is all that it takes for them to actually produce a healthy, wholesome relationship, then you're way off. And societally, we have proven that. Statistically, we have proven that.
Mm-hmm.
Again, because as we spoke about, you have a number of quote unquote saved persons
Mm-hmm.
who get married, get into relationships, but then it results into divorce. So then what then is the problem? Is the problem being that they won't save? No, that's not the problem.
Okay. And that's my point exactly because yes, somebody could be baptized. Yes, they could be going to church consistently, taking part in everything in church, but not have relationship.
Yeah.
And for me, that's the next big ticket item
Right.
that you should be looking at in terms of if you're seeking to find a spouse
Right.
in the church. Is the requirement shouldn't just be he or she saved and they're going to church. You now have to look at relationship and fruit.
Yeah, definitely.
You have to go a
You
little
have to look at
deeper.
the person.
Yeah, you have to go a little, yeah, the person in
The
terms of
person
the relationship with God, the fruit that they bear in other areas
in
of their
in
life too.
general,
It
right?
can't just be any promise that they're in church and they're consistent in going to
Yeah.
church. It just can't be that.
Because and I think one of the reasons to that
Mm,
as to why that is the case is because relationships and marriages
mm,
and this is a very important thing to take note. Relationships and marriages are not just a spiritual thing.
yeah.
You understand?
Mm,
As a matter of fact, relationships and marriages are perhaps 90% more of the physical dimension, the carnal dimension, than the spiritual when
yeah.
it comes to the existence of the relationship,
Yeah.
right? I don't spend all my day praying.
Mm.
I don't spend all my day fasting. You understand what I'm saying?
And it's funny you said that because sometimes some of us have the opinion
Right,
that the more they can speak in tongues,
right. That's
the
that's that's the
yeah.
that's the requisite.
That's,
It's going to work.
hey, sisters, tell me if I lie. Let him only go off in our tongues. That is it.
Yeah,
It is him.
yeah,
You understand?
yeah.
But other things, not they're not lining up.
No, and they're not lining up, and that's the thing. All right, because if you were to look, if you were to go back into um, the book of Genesis, for
Mm-hmm.
example, right before God gave Adam,
Carla is saying agreed because you can be a proper Christian and you as an individual crappy
yeah,
personal experience.
facts. And,
Yeah.
and and I'm sure you would have experienced that. And is there anybody else out there who would have experienced that? That's because it's not just about the spirit. A relationship is not just about the spiritual elements of an individual.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I was just about to highlight. And when you go back to Genesis, for example, before God gave Adam Eve or gave Eve to Adam,
Mm-hmm.
Adam was in the garden taking care of manual stuff. He was not in the garden fasting and praying.
Yeah.
There's no way in the scripture tells you that. Adam took one part of the day, which was the cool of the evening, to fellowship with God, which is very important.
Yeah.
But at the ending of the day, the other components of Adam's life was self-development. And I think that is one of the things that has to be spoken about when it comes to persons in the church. What you encounter, which is why I'll ask you afterwards, what you actually encountered.
Yeah.
But what you do encounter is persons that are so super spiritual,
Yeah.
but they have no self-development. They have no self-development outside of the church. Outside of the church, it's like if they don't exist,
Yeah.
right?
And for me, it's kind of sad because even when I speak to brothers, because the coin is different on both sides, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what I find in terms of females, most females who come into the church come in with the expectation that yeah, I'm going to find my husband in church once he is consistently coming to church and he's
It
baptized,
it
right?
should be it's the ideal place, but it
Yeah,
doesn't
but
happen
but
like
that's the
that.
thinking with most
Yeah.
women.
Mm-hmm.
I come to church, I'll come to a particular church, I
Right.
join that church, I'm going to find him there because obviously the men who come in there will be baptized, they're fellowshipping, so we are equally you. That's the premise. But then on the other hand, I have relatives, I have friends who are males on the outside,
Yeah.
and they are telling me they would not come to church to look for a wife.
Right.
And quite frankly, some of the things that they're saying are appalling
Right.
in terms of their experience with so-called church
What are
girls.
some of those things?
One of the main things is like church girls loose,
Oh,
which
we
which
come
is a whole different
we
topic.
come back to that.
But
Right.
no, but what I'm saying is the
Nobody.
same women in church who are baptized
Yeah. Yeah.
and actively participating in church.
Mm-hmm.
So they see them going to church,
Mm-hmm.
and yet they realize that their standards, the church women's standards,
Mm-hmm.
are no better than the women in the world. If you understand what I'm saying. So
It's a
I
big
hear a
thing.
lot of men saying that they
Mm-hmm.
don't want
Mm-hmm.
a sister,
Yeah.
which to me is sad because if there is no distinction between the woman in church and the woman of the world,
Mm-hmm.
then what are we doing?
Mm-hmm.
So you get that from the men outside, and then you get, on the other hand, you get from women coming into the church environment, a woman in the church environment saying they don't want a brother in church.
Why? I want to hear from you as a woman because you were telling me some of the experiences you had.
For
So,
me, one,
mm,
low key, there are some brothers in the church. Yes, they are baptized. Yes, they are functioning in church,
right.
but they are low key running game. They are low key. Okay, so I will talk about myself. When
Mm,
I got saved, so I grew up in church,
right.
and obviously left the church, went into the world, did my thing. Got saved at a much later age, and came back into the church. Coming back into the church now, I was of the opinion, because I stayed away from the church for about 15 years.
Right.
So coming back to the church now, because I knew what church was then.
Right.
I knew what men in church were then.
Right.
So I came back with that same notion that the men in church were of substance.
Proper men.
They were proper men. You understand? So I came in with
Right.
that notion that these men proper.
Right.
And I came into the church, and about a year or so started to interact with a guy in the church. Mind you, this guy is in church every Sunday. He's in Bible study. He's in prayer meeting. He doesn't
Mm-hmm.
miss a beat.
Right.
Kind of sticks to himself. Shantala Baba, Shadow Benny Sai, Celery, the full Wilson tongues.
Full market.
The full market. He gave the full market in tongues. And we started to communicate and stuff. But then I realized the communication was outside of church, not in church. So in church, we sit on different spectrums, different areas,
Right.
not so much interaction, but outside of church, very much involved. And then I found like other young ladies in the church probably would have seen us talking in the car park. I started to get an eye.
Right.
Only to realize that bro had interactions with other females in the church.
Right.
And,
And I
and
mean,
I mean
interactions.
interactions with
Right.
other
Right.
females.
Right.
You
Right.
understand?
Right.
And was moving normal.
Right.
Like it's a normal thing. So I was with June 2 months ago now. I went to Janet and I swing wrong. And it was normal.
Mm-hmm.
And mind you, this person was operating as though they were it.
Yeah.
Like I am a prize because I can speak in tongues and the pastor loves me and I am highly blessed and favored and
Mm-hmm.
everybody
Mm-hmm.
brother this and
Mm-hmm.
but on the down low,
Mm-hmm.
you're nasty.
Yeah. Yeah.
You understand?
Yeah.
And I remember when I discovered that, because I don't know, I that just kind of gave me a spirit of exposure people. So
Mm-hmm.
if only you know to come around because things is just open up. And I remember I exposed the brother
Right.
and he ran from that congregation
Mm-hmm.
because I'm not doing that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm not playing. I come to Christ on serious thing and I'm not on that folly with you.
Yeah.
So I expose you, I call a name.
Yeah.
You understand?
Yeah.
So now people started to look at you. And the sad thing about it is that it had elders who knew that he was doing that, but nobody spoke about it. It was in hushed tones.
Right.
So it's only when I came out and I spoke about it, I started to hear about the brother dudes.
Right.
So for me, that was a real shocking experience
Right.
because I was not expecting that in the church. And then throughout the years, I realized that it was a normal thing.
Mm-hmm.
It was normal,
Mm-hmm.
and it continues to be normal,
Mm-hmm.
and nobody seems to
And,
say anything about
and the
it.
thing about it is, I could attest to that because I know of occasions
Mm-hmm.
where again guys, and I would speak on the guys part, but nonetheless, I know there are occasions where that similar story. I
Mm-hmm.
know of persons who would have been, as you said, loose
Yeah,
male guys who are loose in the church, and the funny thing, they are going to church. And the
right.
funny thing, they are quote unquote baptized and all these sort of different things. And sisters were getting caught up in that scenario, all because they're seeing them in church. And all because they're seeing them, they know them to be quote unquote safe.
Yeah,
So then I guess so what we're saying is that if the criteria is because you see someone in church,
yeah,
then that's the only criteria, then sadly that
Yeah,
criteria is not working.
because if we're going by the measurements, take off equally yoked, he's baptized and he's in church,
Yeah.
and that's it.
Based on those examples,
Based on
that can
those,
never be the fact.
that can never be it. So
And
now
that's
we
it.
need to look deeper
Yeah.
at connection to God, to Daddy,
Mm-hmm.
fruit in
Yeah.
terms of what you're putting out there, what you're bearing,
Mm-hmm.
and stuff. And I believe the onus is on the individuals to do the work, not to take people at face value as well.
And I'm glad you said do the work, yeah,
Yeah.
because I think one of the things when we were speaking about it,
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that I did put down to highlight was that it's a culture that we don't have,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll talk about that. Unfortunately, however, abroad, which seems to practice this culture that I would mention a lot, has seemed to abuse it, but it's a good culture, but it's a culture we don't have, and that's the culture of dating,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because many times we don't understand that. For me, I don't biblically see anything wrong with dating, and that's something we could discuss about. And what do we mean by
It,
dating, right?
yeah, people don't
what
get
we
carried
mean
away. We don't mean.
what we mean by dating is not sleeping with everybody, right? But what we mean by dating is actually taking persons through a process of examination, giving yourself an opportunity to see this person, look at this person, and not just one person,
Mhm.
right? I believe honestly that there are persons out there who can take the process of healthy dating, and that
Mhm.
would allow you to see what you were just talking about, these fruits and so on. But instead, we were taught to jump in.
Mm.
You understand what I'm saying? We have a
Yeah.
culture of jumping into a relationship and just, you know, until it explodes, right?
All right. So even as we deal with the whole equally yoked thing, I remember we were having a discussion,
Right,
and we were talking about in terms of like oxen in a field.
right,
If you put two ox together, the yoke, it was physically, and
right,
that was
right,
what I was talking about. It's
correct,
literally something that goes
correct,
over both necks,
correct,
and in order for it to work,
correct,
they both have to be going in the same direction.
correct.
Carla is saying, I attend church regularly, highly involved in my congregation, and I want no church husband.
Why? Yeah,
Really?
but we need
She
to
said,
know why.
really? Not.
Why? No, but I mean, we're trying to give our perspective, but it would be nice to hear from you guys as to why.
And
Join the
I can
conversation.
understand where Carla is coming from because I've been there, as I said before.
Hmm.
And when you get burned, it's really, really hard, eh?
It
It's
does.
really
It
hard
does. I
because
agree.
it's something that you wasn't prepared for or looking for from the church.
Hmm.
You expect that it will have a different caliber of persons in the
In the church.
church,
Hmm.
but as the Bible said, the wheat and the tear grow together, so we still had to sift
Yeah.
and see. Um, but I was saying, when you have the yoke
Yeah.
around the ox, both of them have to be going in the same direction in order for them to be able to plow.
Hmm.
It can't be one want to go so on one is they just don't move.
Correct.
So for me, equally yoke is not just that the person is baptized and that they're going to church,
Hmm.
but it has to be when it comes to vision where we going.
Hmm.
You understand? It
Hmm.
has to be a mutual
Yeah.
agreement as to
Yeah.
where we going, where we want to be in the next 5 years. Um, do we want to have kids? Do if we don't want to have
Yeah.
kids, um, how our home structure going to be like, finances,
And
all these things come in, has to do with the equal
has to do with yoking.
with the yoking,
Hmm.
being yoked.
Hmm.
It's not just about the person being in
Hmm.
church and they baptized.
No.
No.
And that's the thing. The church has sold relationships short by just telling them the person just needs to be saved,
Yeah.
right? We have sold the congregation short by just saying to persons, it's once the person is saved and once the person is going to church, they're good.
Yeah.
That's a selling short, and we have just established, and that's what we've been doing for the past how much minutes, that it cannot be, and it
Mm.
really is not. Practically, it is not the only requisite. It is not. So,
Mm.
like as you were saying with yoking, when we understand what the scripture talks about when it says yoking, as you
Mm-hmm.
perfectly highlighted, it is really two persons going in the same direction.
Yeah.
Now, this even gets you to understand why even more so it could not have just been referring to, or it's not just referring to a
Right.
person that is saved per
Mm-hmm.
se, because if it was that, then we all would be sharing the same components.
Yeah.
And because we are individuals, right? I, you are not me, I'm not you,
Yeah.
right? Sister Jane is not you. The likings that you have, Sister Jane is not going to have,
Mm-hmm.
right? So Sister Jane has to look for someone that is compatible
Yeah.
to her. It's not just about someone that is saved, but it's someone that is compatible,
Yeah.
right? And the visions is the same as you are saying, because yoking relates to going in the same
Direction.
direction. When I'm yoked to someone or someone is yoked to me, if
Mm-hmm.
I am going left and we don't have an agreement to go left together, and they want to go right and I want to go left, we both stay standing in the same position, because neither one of us could go in any direction,
Yeah.
right? And that is what yoking is about. But Paul just said it's much more difficult with
Mm-hmm.
an unbeliever. And
Yeah.
again, we establish an unbeliever is not someone who isn't saved, and we come to that, I think.
Yeah.
Right?
So, um, again, for those who came on a little bit late, we were trying to debunk, is it hard to find a spouse in the church? And we started on the premise of being equally yoked. And we have been talking about that for the past few minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And we have established that equally yoked does not mean that the person is just baptized and going to church.
Mm-hmm.
Is a lot more.
Yeah.
You understand? It has to do with future goals. It has to do with where do we see ourselves, even in terms of ministry. Because your husband
It
might
has.
want to, if your husband say, "Well, the Lord tell me I'm supposed to preach," and then you say no. You
Mm-hmm.
understand?
Mm-hmm.
Conflict there, pulling
Um,
and tugging. One want to have kids, one don't want to have kids. Some people just feel okay. He or she's in church. They saved. Let us get married without even questioning
yeah.
the things
The
that,
carnal elements.
yeah.
The
And as
carnal
you were
elements.
saying, honestly, the marriage, yes, marriage is honorable to God and all of
Mm-hmm.
that, but we live 90% of our marriage
And
in
our lives.
our lives in Canada. We don't be praying 24/7
No.
as a couple. You're
No.
not going to be in prayer 24/7. That's
Yeah.
not the only requirement,
Yeah.
because we have to live in this world, so we
Yeah.
have to do things. You
Mm-hmm.
understand?
Mm-hmm.
So we have to be like minded, even as we do those things,
Yeah.
even as we live day to day.
Yeah.
So we debunk that. And so the question that comes now,
Right.
you know me.
Right.
um, since there seems to be a challenge with finding a partner
Mm-hmm.
in the church.
Interest. And Carla agrees to that.
Well, yeah, but Carla
Mm.
already
Clearly.
said she not looking in church for no husband.
Can we still waiting for why, yeah? Yeah.
Right, Carla said plain. But if, because I've realized there are a lot of single sisters in the church, eh?
Yeah.
A lot. And like for me, who when I crossed 40, I went in panic. I went
Yeah.
in panic mode. Like I crossed 40 and like this thing ain't happening.
Yeah.
I went in immediate panic. So
Yeah.
then now you start to um sift through and see what left.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes you might
What
pick.
left?
Yeah, that's how this go.
Hmm.
I'm being real. This program is about being real.
Right.
Sometimes sisters start to sift through and see what left.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you're picking from the dregs. Then you know you're picking from the dregs. And that's just the truth.
Right.
They may not have been a top pick. You understand what I'm saying? Because you realize what days were left.
Right.
You understand?
That's tough.
And yeah, and it's the reality, because most churches they realize have a lot of women who single,
And
past the
guys too.
40s,
And guys
and
too.
guys too, but yeah, mostly women,
Yeah.
right? Who single, and it's because they really can't find anybody in the church,
Mm-hmm.
and then be
Mm-hmm.
running on this premise. They had to be baptized,
Mm-hmm.
they had to be in the church actively.
Mm-hmm.
So, would you say it is wrong for somebody in the church
Mm-hmm.
to, if, and I'm not say go looking for somebody who is not in the church, but
Mm-hmm.
if you should meet somebody
Mm-hmm.
who does not go to church, one,
Mm-hmm.
and who is not baptized,
Right.
but the person has
Who's not
all
saved?
who is not saved.
Right.
So if no, again, I'm not saying to actively just run out there looking like a crazy person,
Mhm.
but if you, while going around your business,
Right.
you meet somebody
Yeah.
who is not in the church and somebody who is not saved,
Yeah.
but they have all the attributes
Yeah.
that you know
Yeah.
could make a good spouse.
Yeah.
And I've heard situations like that.
Mm-hmm.
They have all the attributes that makes for a great spouse.
Right.
But then you go to your pastor, whoever, and they tell you the person, oh, they're not equally you. No.
Yeah. They're not equally, or because they're not saved.
Yeah, because they're not saved.
Right.
And it's an outright no.
Right.
How we treat them with that?
Um. Before I answer,
Uh-huh.
let me give my experience in terms of the occasions where I felt okay. I had it with church women.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. Let me give my experience. No. So Carl, you're not alone. But I had a season of that as well. Um, the funny thing, what was happening
Mm-hmm.
was that you had this notion of super spirituality, right? What I mean by that, there was hardly any room for carnal development.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was centered around the church. It wasn't really centered around life.
Also, your experience wasn't that the women were loose, but they were over, you was meeting the ones who over spiritual. Okay.
It was spiritual. And so there wasn't any room for like carnal development or anything like that. It was almost as if the entire relationship is going to be spiritual and that's it. And the funny thing, I have also heard persons spoke about that men,
Mm-hmm.
right, who have gotten married, and everything majority. I'm sure you would have heard
Yeah.
persons. Their wives are off in the church, Sunday,
Monday, Tuesday.
Monday, Wednesday Bible study, prayer
Yeah.
meeting Friday. So they practically see their wives twice for the week
Mm-hmm.
and that kind of stuff. And again, these are some of the relationships that fall apart.
Yeah.
And you will have to honestly ask why, because again, if we are going on the premise of just you are saved and that is going to ensure
Mm-hmm.
a perfect relationship and marriage, you are saved and that's the end of it,
Mm-hmm.
then we are sorely wrong based on the life experiences that
Yeah.
we both share and that a lot of persons share,
Yeah.
right? So to come back and answer your question now, do I think it is wrong for someone if they do meet someone that is outside of the church and that is not saved, is it wrong for them to pursue a relationship? That what you're
Yeah.
asking? Absolutely not. And I would say why. Scripturally, why I think scripturally is not like that.
Yeah.
Um,
Because everything we
of course,
try to do,
it's not a what
it's not
well, at
our
least I
thoughts.
try not to go on my
Yeah.
thoughts. I go on what the Word of God
Okay.
says.
Go
Yes.
ahead.
Scripturally,
Mm-hmm.
as we established earlier on, an
Mm-hmm.
unbeliever is not someone who is unsaved. Those are two different persons.
Mm-hmm.
The unbeliever is someone who is an unbeliever. It's like you telling me, okay, the color of the sky is blue
Mm-hmm.
when the sun is out.
Mm-hmm.
And I am saying to you, I do not believe that.
Yeah.
And I will never believe that.
Mm-hmm.
That's an unbeliever.
Okay.
It's totally different from someone who doesn't know
Yeah.
that the sky is blue, being told that the sky is blue, and given an opportunity to accept
Except
that the
the
sky
sky
is
is blue.
blue.
Okay.
You understand?
Mm-hmm.
So when Paul spoke about an unbeliever, it's entirely different. And that's what studying the word gives you. It allows you to understand clearly what was being said, not just in this case, but throughout the scriptures, right?
Yeah.
So in that case, Paul was really referring to someone that has equivocally established they are not going to believe.
Yeah.
You don't go yoking with that. And that's why afterwards he said, look, what fellowship does righteousness have with darkness,
Mm-hmm.
with light, with darkness, and etc. He gave all these other examples because it's clear that they are not, and that's who they are. You
Okay.
understand? So you don't yoke with these persons,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now let's deal with the person that is not saved. Um, the funny thing about it is, statistically, you see persons having excellent marriages, excellent relationships, and they're not saved.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is, okay, what is the premise of being saved and unsaved? And the Bible again gives us a very clear example of that. And we said it earlier, but we'll elaborate a little more. It takes an individual less than 5 seconds to be saved.
Mm-hmm.
And that was given by the example of the thief on the cross, for example, right? He was not saved, but in less than 5 seconds, he just had to hear and believe
Mm-hmm.
and receive. And he was saved. So the point I'm making is that you don't throw away a person's character, a person's value system, a person's morals simply because they have not yet heard
Mm-hmm.
and given the opportunity to receive and become saved in less than 5 seconds. You just say to this because, okay, you know what, this person isn't saved, so I'm not going to even think about entertaining this
About
person.
dating.
Yeah.
Because when I say meet somebody or the church, and I say that you meet somebody and they just decide, oh, you're going up and get married to the person. It
No,
doesn't
that's
go
not what
that
we're
way.
saying.
But you meet somebody and you realize
You
character-wise,
develop acquaintance.
you realize that they have a really good character. You all have, after discussions, you realize that, yes, well, me and this person heading in the same
Mm-hmm,
direction.
mm-hmm.
We have a good understanding, communication skills with each other.
Yeah,
This person would make
yeah,
a good husband or a wife.
yeah.
And you decide, you know what, I'm going to share my
I'm going to share Christ with them.
Christ with them,
Mm-hmm.
and thereby give them an opportunity.
Yeah, to
You know,
walk the same spiritual direction because they have well showed that perhaps they have well showed that they are walking. You all are both walking in the same direction when it comes to other things.
but I have seen because I have seen it in recent times too, where somebody would have come to the church. I've seen it before throughout the time that I've been in Christ, where somebody would bring somebody who isn't yet saved,
Mm-hmm.
and they would start to come to church,
Mm-hmm.
and persons will have an issue with that. Pastors will have an issue with that. I've seen people leave church
Right.
because of that, because they no longer want them to serve where they were serving in terms of ministry,
Why? Why is
because
that?
they are dating a quote unquote unsafe person.
Right.
You understand? So I've seen people ostracized because of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Pastors basically denouncing and saying outright, you cannot, they're not going to tolerate that
Right.
in the church.
Right.
And you're not married, they're just
And
dating, eh?
right. And that's the thing. It depends on this is where we determine now what unsafe means. Now,
Mm-hmm.
even before we continue, let me just say this. Again, the ideal thing is for us as believers to find someone
Yeah.
within the church community. That's the ideal thing. There's always going to be the ideal thing, but we have proven it is not necessarily always the case, and in a lot of cases it does not work and it does not happen. And you have persons, whether we have this discussion or not, we have persons that are looking outside of the church,
Yeah.
right? So the premise must be established as to if there's a guideline, if there's a thing. So yes, so even as in continuing what you're saying, in terms of like persons who would have those experiences in the church and whatever, you cannot, a person that is not saved, they are not saved. And I think by the time you get to the bridge of getting into the context of
Mm-hmm.
a serious relationship, by that time, if you are a Christian, I'm sure they would know that.
Yeah.
I don't think that's something that they would not know. So
Mm-hmm.
what I mean to say by that, you will have an opportunity to see whether or not by that time, if this person has any intention to walk your spiritual path.
And because my thing is, if the person is in church, they're coming to church.
Mm-hmm.
They are coming because they might be curious, they want to know,
Right,
they want to learn, so they are coming with you.
right,
So they're coming to church, they
right,
might start to come Bible study,
right,
they might come prayer meeting.
right.
But then there are persons within the church, some most times the pastors who see a problem because the
And
person
not just the pastors, some members,
members too, because the
some
person
leaders,
isn't
you understand?
saved.
They
And what
aren't
I'm
quote
saying,
unquote saved.
but what I'm saying, if the person is coming actively participating,
Hmm.
there's the opportunity
Of
for them to
course.
meet Christ.
Of course.
And why would you actively push somebody out the door, so to speak?
Hmm.
With,
Hmm.
with that behavior, because anybody who comes into the church, so my thing is, there's only safe people that's coming to your church. So when members leaving churches and just coming to your church,
Hmm.
nobody who's seeking Christ coming. So
Hmm.
I don't understand the rationale
Yeah.
behind it.
Yeah.
Because there are good people out there who may not have been exposed to Christ in
That's the
that
point.
way. And if given the opportunity,
Yeah.
they would come, because
Yeah.
I had a close friend, she passed away. And when she met her husband, then
Hmm.
he he was not in Christ in
Right.
our way.
Right.
He started to come to church with her. He
Right.
started to come to Bible study. And it took him some months. And I would say it wasn't because of her. It actively took him months to receive Christ.
Yeah,
So you could
because
see he
God was doing
was,
a work on him,
yeah. It wasn't,
right?
sometimes you could tell it might have some who would come and just say yeah because
Hmm. Hmm.
they feel by saying yes, you're gonna be
Hmm.
good,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
that kind of thing. But there are persons who genuinely would want, to
Hmm.
learn, to know,
Hmm.
and then they
Hmm.
would
And then they
accept,
make a decision.
they
Yeah.
make a decision.
Hmm.
And my thing is, if after some time, if you're dating this person, after some time you realize like, okay, they're really not interested
Yeah, but then
in, then
you're
you
gonna
know.
have some issues. And the reason why you're gonna have some issues because being yoked again
Mm-hmm.
really has to do with all the components going in the same direction,
Or not some.
not some, right? So of course, while someone outside of the church is going to may possess good qualities
Mm-hmm.
and good attributes and so on, eventually, if you all are not walking the same spiritual path,
Mm-hmm.
then you may encounter some. So you don't want to go into a permanent
Situation.
situation unless all those bases are covered. But the question is, can you pursue someone outside of the church environment who demonstrates that they have very good qualities, very good attributes, and so on. And the only subject matter might be one, they're not going to church, or two, they're not yet saved. And my thing is that, yes, based on the premise of the scripture, of course,
Okay.
you understand, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, of course. But you as an individual has to be very, of course, understanding it's you're looking at a long-term decision, right?
Um. So yes, folks, we will be debunking. Is it hard to find a spouse in the church? And we went through the whole premise of being equally yoked. Some of the challenges that we face, both as men and women, and what we should be looking for. For me, it's just kind of sad
Hmm.
when I hear people say that they do not want.
Yeah, it is
They
sad.
do not
It is
want
sad. And
somebody
that's
from the church. They
it
do
is
not
sad.
want to be married. And
Hmm.
it's sad for me, even when people in the church, when people outside the church say there's one thing, but when people who are in the church, people who
Hmm.
they really
Yeah,
they're doing what's right, they love God and stuff, but because of hurt and that kind of thing, they're saying they do not want
somebody that's in the church.
somebody that's
And
in the
that's the thing.
church.
And the question is why.
Is why. So I don't know. I am trying to understand if we need more teachings in the church in terms of marriage and relationships, because that's not something you really hear about.
That's one. That's one of the
Um,
things we do need more of.
yeah, we don't have any classes that really share or tell you what a hus how you should be a husband, how you should be a wife.
Hmm.
Yes, we could read the Bible for ourselves, you know,
Hmm.
and get into the word for ourselves, but I think it needs to be
Hmm.
focalized
Hmm.
more in the church.
Hmm.
I think waiting until you decide to get married and just going to counseling for that period, for me, is not enough.
It's not enough. It
It's,
really
it's
isn't.
not
For
enough.
some persons, it's
Yeah,
not. For some of us, it's not enough.
it's not enough. I
Hmm.
think a lot more need to be done with our young adults
Hmm.
and really kind of training people on what the scripture says, what a husband should be,
Hmm.
what a wife should be. Because whereas we could generalize in terms of roles in the carnal sense,
Mm-hmm.
where we don't have to stick to female male gender roles in terms of the carnal sense in a household, in a
Mm-hmm.
marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Like if the husband decide he wants to cook and the wife like yard work,
Right.
it's okay to switch up those roles.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, when it comes to the spiritual aspect
Mm-hmm.
of a marriage and what God says
Yeah.
the male role is and the female role is, that cannot be altered.
No, it's
Or else
it
it's
cannot.
kids.
Yeah.
You understand? So
Facts.
I think it's something that it needs to be taught in church, not just
Definitely.
wait until we decide like, okay, I choose you and we're going to counseling
Yeah. Yeah.
for 6 months before
Yeah.
or 3 months before the
Yeah.
wedding kind of
Yeah.
thing. I
Yeah.
don't think that works.
Yeah.
It's not enough. People
Yeah.
are not equipped.
Yeah.
We are not equipped.
Yeah. Facts. And one of the things I think is where that is concerned is at the aspect of I don't think persons really experience a personal development in the church as much as they ought to,
Yeah.
right? In my view, I think why it exists, this challenge with even as the question relates, finding a spouse in the church is
Mm.
because there's a disattachment between the practical life of persons that
Mm-hmm.
attend church
Yeah.
and church itself. You
Yeah.
hardly have practicality being taught in the church,
Yeah.
right? You hardly have anything practical being taught in the church as opposed to the spiritual culture of things.
Yeah.
And that produces just a one-sided individual.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't produce a balance. So a
Yeah.
lot of times you have persons in the church that is not a whole person.
Mm-hmm.
They might be all spiritual, but they're not balanced,
Yeah.
you know? And that in itself has a lot of problems. But I think there's a subject would be other country.
I think it's something that we need to talk about more.
We definitely, yeah.
Um,
Certainly.
yeah, it will be helpful if for those watching the watching this on replay, to ask questions, to give their comments, so we can kind of chart the way forward. Because I think this is a conversation that we need
There's a lot of components. There's
to
a lot
keep
of
on
things to
going.
hear.
Yeah, it's a lot.
There's a lot of things to discuss. And it's nice to hear persons' experiences as they heard ours as well.
Yeah.
Yeah?
So, guys, it was so nice hanging out with you all
It was
this
great.
evening. It's always good to see you all on. Carla, Giselle, Shaki, good night. Debbie, Adana. I saw Joel on earlier. Shanique, Rhonda. It was really nice having you all. Joel was on earlier.
Yeah.
I can't remember some of the other guys' name. I saw Emery on, Esther on, Henrik. Thank you all so much for spending time with us, and we do appreciate you. And you will find us again next Wednesday, right here at 8 p.m. Um, we're gonna post what the topic is going to be. Um, Carla, leave me alone, please. Carla is saying she find a comment here before the program. Good night, Deborah. Carla, you see my hair. You know how hard it's me to comb that while you're talking, girl. And tonight I was feeling a little girly, so you see my little piglet singing now. I'm a feminine tonight. I'm feeling feminine tonight. So thank you all so much for spending time with us. See you all next Wednesday. Bye.